Welcome to Ready Layer 2 with me, Get.Small. This is a podcast for the founders, innovators, and experimenters building the future of Web3 on Arbitrum. Hey everybody, welcome to the Ready Layer 2 podcast. I'm your host, Don, or Get.Small, as I'm known on the internets, and I'm joined here today by my friend N8amis from SpireDAO. N8amis, finally, we're having a recording of our podcast. We've been working on this for a while. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an epic run to try and get this scheduled, so I'm glad we're finally here.
Yeah, absolutely. We had all of the hurdles we could possibly have, a couple of reschedules, a couple of sick days, and then we finally got together last time, and then my mic was broken, of all things, which is literally
Imagine
never
that.
happened
Imagine
in my
that.
life. So here we are. I've got this mic. I've got a brand new backup mic, just in case it decides to break in the middle of this. So we're doing this today. We are actually streaming live to Sanko TV for a first experiment with that platform. So excited to have that going. And N8amis, I've been digging into your SpireDAO here for a little bit, getting ready for this. And I can tell you, man, I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. I think it's tremendous. It's unique. It's awesome. I'm super happy to share you with the viewers and listeners here today. So if we just start with that quick intro for you, who are you? What is your entry into the Web3 space and into the storytelling space and everything else?
Yeah, for sure. I stumbled into crypto around COVID. I think I always knew about Bitcoin and heard about Ethereum, but I didn't really understand it. And I think what really actually drew me in was learning about NFTs. And what was interesting to me about that, and with Small Brains is one of my first mints, actually. I had no idea what Arbitrum was. I learned how to bridge from the Discord.
Nice.
And just immediately, I saw all the potential for stories there. I've always been a storyteller. I've always been interested in writing and fiction. I have a journalism degree. And I just saw all these cartoon pictures and all the activity from the communities and different things like that. And I said, why is nobody telling the story? And that really drew me in. And my interest in Web3 and the blockchain kind of from the get-go has been in trying to explore how you can tell the stories. So I guess I first got my start, I would get whitelists for different projects by telling stories about the project in the Discord. And that kind of worked for me. And I said, okay, maybe people are interested in this. And then I hooked up with Bridge World, which is a TreasureDAO flagship project, and started doing some storytelling for them. We did some live Discord events. I did a live Discord event, a couple of those for Small Brains as well. And I got into a project called Gojira, which is on Ethereum. And I did some writing for them, copy work, and I was on their marketing team for a while. So I've just been exploring the possibilities from that from the get-go. And then hooked up with the rest of the guys on the Spire team, and we started talking about community-generated content and trying to give communities the opportunity to build out lore for the games that they were really into. So that's how Spire got started. And we've been working on it in the background for a couple of years now. It took quite a lot of work to get the platform up and running. And we had a lot of conversations, the three of us, and got some devs involved and things like that. And that's how Spire was born.
Awesome. So back to the beginning where you started doing this like storytelling in the Discord. That was just a show up and start doing it kind of scenario where you just popped in the Discord and started telling the stories, or did you like get permission from the projects? How did that play out?
So for Bridge World, I had written there was a competition for lifers to tell a story about a seed of life. And there was an art competition and a storytelling competition, and I submitted a story, and I won for the story submission. And then I think, one of the guys from the team, I can't remember who it was, reached out to me and said, would you be interested in doing this more? We're looking for somebody to tell some stories for Bridge World. And I got in touch, they put me in touch with Corel after that, and they said they wanted to do this live event in the Discord. And it was I had no idea what it was about. They just didn't really give us any guidance. They just said, we want you to tell a story and have the community be involved. So me and another guy ended up popping into the Discord. And what we started doing, we wrote a story. And then along the way in the Discord, we'd put out choices and be like, okay, the character has come to this crossroads or whatever the case may be, and they can do this or this. And people would vote in the Discord for what choice they thought character
Okay.
should do. And then based on popular opinion, that would change how the story unfolded. So it was like a 4-day event, and it ended up being super fun. And it was so popular, we did another one that kind of continued that story down the road. And then we did one for Smalls, which was centered around the NFT NYC event that they had a couple of years ago. And that's how all that continued. And then Bridge World wanted to do more official lore. And I was contracted with Treasure to start doing that along with a couple other guys. So,
very nice. So so in the beginning it was the contest that pulled you in, just participating, doing your thing, winning that just kind of led to the next one. And then I love that, like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into with the first Bridge World one, but you're like, yeah, well, sure, what the hell? I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll show up and we'll tell a story and we'll see how this goes. I love that. I think that's a great way to find the thing to do, because sometimes you don't know what the thing is until you just start doing stuff. So that's pretty cool. And certainly it makes sense how that could lead to where you're going. So a couple of years ago, you and a few others start coming up with this concept for SpireDAO. So take me to the kind of genesis of that. Those are just conversations like we see gaps in stories that are out there, or what was the original idea?
So I guess the original idea was related to Bridge World. So me and a guy named Jesse and a guy named Zach were the lore team for Bridge World. And we did some official stuff. We put a video out that you might have seen that tied into one of the stories. And then we had all this other stuff. And that was around the time when the Harvesters were launching. So we named the Harvesters. We did some stories around that. And what we wanted to propose is that it's really cool that there are team generated stories and kind of guidelines for people. Because a lot of the stories that were coming out, like, communities are always telling stories, but a lot of times there's no cohesion. There's no, I could tell a story that has its own sort of world, and then somebody else could tell a story that could conflict with that. And it just seemed like really chaotic. So what we wanted to do was establish a baseline for people and tell them, like, these are some truths about this world. So Bridge World, for example, we had definitions around what magic was, what the role of magic was, how different classes of legions would, like, what their kind of philosophies were, what their culture was like. So we wanted to give the community that as a baseline, and then say, with that, go forth and prosper and write stories and
creative boundaries.
Yeah. So it's like, if you don't
inside the space,
if you don't give any handrails, it just gets too chaotic. But if you provide a little bit with a room to explore, it's like traffic lights if everybody drove around and there was no rules of the road, there'd be accidents all the time. It'd be complete chaos. But if you set up a little bit of rules for people, it actually provides more freedom for them to explore in a way that's going to be meaningful. So that's how the idea for Spire was born.
That's awesome. And then, so before we get too far into the details of it, like, I want to make sure that the listener knows what we're talking about. What is the elevator pitch here? What does Spire do, and who do you do it for?
Yeah. So Spire is primarily interested in building out the universe through stories and artwork for games right now, specifically based on Arbitrum. And we have the most ties to TreasureDAO. So, like, our first partnership is with Realm, and that's what we've done for them. So we've set the baseline with 6 stories that we started as a team. And now we've handed it over to the community, and they compete to continue the story by adding chapters to those original stories. And then on top of that, there's also art competitions to complement the storylines. So we're a platform to build out on-chain lore for games so that their universe is stickier, it's more interesting. You know, if you consider the Star Wars universe, it started with the movies, and then you had fan fiction, and now you have all these spin-off series and different things like that. So we feel like games in the Arbitrum ecosystem deserve to have these universes created, and we feel like there's no better group of people positioned to do that than the people who are interested in the games themselves. So that's what Spire's for. Does that make sense?
That's awesome. Oh, 100% it does. And when you're talking to a project, what's the value proposition to a game?
Hmm.
that maybe they already have some lore. Like, why would they bring SpireDAO on to
Sure.
help them out?
So I think there's a couple of reasons. Most of Web3 they're startup companies. They're not giant groups of people who have lore departments. They're usually a
Right.
couple devs, and they're primarily focused on making the game loops viable, making the economy something that's going to be attractive to people, and the artwork. And I think everybody's really interested in lore, and there's all these sort of attempts to get some lore going, but it all seems to stall out or to it'll be a non-starter because the teams are focused on other things.
Sure, it
So
gets deprioritized basically. A
yeah.
game before you have a story, you got to keep building the game loops and
Yeah.
keeping it interesting that way. Yep, sure.
But I think that's one thing is, hey, we know you're interested in having this as an aspect of your game, but you probably don't have time to do it. So Spire will research everything, work with you to set everything up so that it's going to be in line with your vision. And we're also professional writers, so the quality that we bring is going to be at a level that some people on the team may or may not be capable of delivering.
That's a really good point right there. Yep.
And then we set it up to make sure that when we hand it over to the community, it's going to be something that they can build upon without deviating from the team's vision. So I think that's one of the value propositions. Another of the value propositions is that, especially in Web3, attention spans are really short. And it takes time to develop games, right? So if you look at a game, they come out with a big update, everybody's really excited about it. And then after that kind of wears off, there's a lull in between these updates. So something that Spire can help do is give the community something to continue to be passionate about in between game updates. And down the road also, the Spire platform will include audio, it will include video, it'll include comics, it'll include animation. So we want to give these games a way to expand their IP and get into different things that are going to help make their games stickier, attract new users, really immerse people in a world rather than them just checking in, logging in every day to play the game. And it's a grind. It becomes a grind. And I think having a world based around it is something that excites people and keeps them around.
Yeah, I totally buy into that. And this isn't just content for them to consume necessarily either. This is content that they can participate in creating, because you guys have this whole competition to create the lore, basically. Right. So let's start talking about those mechanics, right? Like, how is it engaging the community? I guess let me start from the beginning is, how do you work with the project? You can use Realm as the example, since you guys are decently into that one. They already had some lore. They already had a vision. So how do you work with that team to kind of set those creative boundaries and traffic lights like you talked about, and basically allow them to keep some control over it? Because they want to release control, but they also don't want to turn it something completely different than they ever imagined, I would think. So how do you start with the projects and give them that element of control before you set it loose on the community?
Yeah, maybe an example. So I can't mention the name of the project right now, but we're going to be launching our second partnership in March. And we're currently involved in this discovery process with that game right now. I would say they had an extensive amount of lore, this particular game, and it was still incomplete. There was things that they still need to work out. There was things that they wanted to figure out, define. And then there's some things that they want to keep vague. And we comb through all the lore as a team, we start putting together something we call a fundamentals document, which is essentially like the glossary of that world, and gives us a foundation to build some stories upon. So like, how does different elements, like what's the physics of the world? If there's a system of magic or a system of politics between different groups of people, like how do they view each other? What are their cultures like? What is their system? This particular game has a system of like magic. It's like a fantasy type of atmosphere. You have to get definitions for all those things and put it together and say, okay, how does this world work? How does it put together? And then from there, we expand on things. And I think one of the challenges for Spire that's really interesting when we do this is how can we write 6 incomplete stories that are all from various perspectives that give the community enough information to understand, like, okay, I get how this world works, but also
Okay.
provide them enough room for imagining their own things. So that's one of the big challenges. We work very closely with the teams. So with this particular
Hmm.
team, at the end of the week, we're going to give them our outline ideas for the 6 stories. And then we'll go
Okay.
through a round of feedback, and they'll tell us, like, hey, really like these ideas. Could we incorporate X, Y, or Z? I feel like we're missing this. And then once we get through that, we'll write the rough drafts for the story, bring that back to the team. They'll go through it again, give us the okay on it. We'll polish that off, and then we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. And now this is, I imagine there's a lot of development of the lore happening right here too, right? Because like you said, this particular group already had a fair amount
Mm-hmm.
of lore. I'm guessing there was a lot of gaps in there though, right? Like
Yeah.
things that you guys felt needed to exist. You'd say, how does this work? How does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you said something like, what's the gravity like on there? Like how often are they like, wow, I never really thought about that before.
Yeah,
And like that
frequently. Yeah.
starts, yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, that's what I'm picturing.
I
And
think
that's, so that
that's
starts
a
helping them develop their own story that they thought they knew already, which is probably fun.
yes. And I think a lot of these things, we see a lot of these things as they start to come together. Teams get ideas for future game developments actually as well, right? Because
Oh, that's awesome.
once their world is more fully fleshed out and some of those gaps start to become filled, it gives them ideas for how they can develop the game to be more holistic in line with a universe that's going to make sense. So I think
That's
in
awesome.
particular with the partner we're working with right now, there's going to be a lot of cohesion between the story and how the game continues to unfold, which I think is going to be really cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you do these, and what's the term? I don't know if you said it, if I read it, but like these are like the foundational text or the Genesis text.
Yeah.
What's the term for
Yeah.
it?
So we call them the Genesis text, and there's
Okay.
6 of those. That's our
Always
model, is to
6,
do
right?
6 of those. And some of them we try to do a mix, like we do a mix of like character-driven narratives where the continuation of that story would likely be based around this particular character. And we also do different ones, like for Realm, there's one that was like pseudo-religious pamphlet or like a weird cult kind of marketing tool. We did one that was like a scientific journal that was found and being updated. We're going to do one for this next project that's like a diary from the foreman that was constructing a monument back in time, and that will shed light on different happenings in the world. So we try to give the community a broad base of types of stories to continue to start turning the gears of imagination for those people.
Yeah, I could see that. And that's what you were referencing earlier is the challenge of creating something that's true to the founding team's vision, but also open enough to allow for that
Yeah.
continuation. So I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question exactly, but I'm curious about that. How do you do that? Like when you nail down the story, do you ever get a point where you're like, I feel like we've created a dead end here, and then have to almost back up and create some openings, or like can you explain what that process is like?
Yeah, I think it's just something that it's like our number one priority when we're writing, is to keep in mind that these stories are unique. And I think something that's really special about storytelling on the blockchain with a community is the idea that I, as a writer, am going to have a particular vision for how the story should be continued. However, once we put it out into the community's hands, that's not how it's going to unfold. I
Yeah,
almost guarantee it.
you're not
Like,
in control anymore. Yeah.
so I can't, by default, as a person, write a story that I don't have an idea for how it continues.
Right.
But we always have to keep in mind, I have to write this in a way that's not going to be so leading that the story unfolds based on my vision of it. I have to write
Yeah.
it in a way that is going to give people a lot of room for their own creativity.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
that's something you don't see elsewhere. And I think that's one of the very unique things about what we're doing and about Web3 communities, is that I could write a chapter the next chapter in the story is going to be written by someone else. The next chapter could be written by someone else. And you're going to see over time a really beautiful story unfold that's written by 10, 15 different people.
Yeah,
And maybe
right
down
on.
the road, I write another chapter that ends up being there. And the vision's constantly changing. But one thing that, is important that you mentioned that we didn't really touch on is not straying from the team's vision. So with the competitions, the teams approve submissions and they also select the winner. So it's not a completely decentralized
Right.
platform. It's open for participation from anyone.
Okay,
But
that makes a
at
lot of
the end of the
sense.
day, the team is approving the submissions and they're also selecting the winners so that they can maintain some control over the storyline and be able to say, I don't really see that one being something that we want to see in the game.
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
But this one is really well written and maybe it's something we hadn't thought of, but it aligns with our vision. So that's an
Nice.
important
Okay,
piece of
that's
it.
really cool. That's really cool. That's so this we'll jump right into that process then. So you do these Genesis texts and then you create a contest. How do you pick the one that you want to start branching off of first to release out to the community?
So we just look through the 6 stories we have and we select like an order to them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just a process between us and the team that we're partnered with and saying, this seems like a good one to start with. And usually that's going to be one that is fairly simple to continue. The character driven narratives, I think, are pretty good for that because you already have an established character. People don't have to come up with their own character. It's just, okay, I understand who this character is and how their journey started. And now I can continue that down these different paths and which one I want to choose. So I think usually started off with one of the character driven ones and then start to mix it in so that we're not going to put 4 character driven ones in a row. We're going to break it up and
Mm-hmm.
have maybe a character driven one, maybe one that's a little different, come back to another character driven one, and so on. With our next partner, we're going to do something pretty cool. So we will do a live event in their Discord, similar to
Mm-hmm.
what we were talking about with Bridge World. We'll tell that story together, and then that will actually become the very first Genesis text that opens up for competition directly after the event. So I think that'll be pretty cool.
Okay. Got it. Very cool. So the community will pick that up then, and they've heard the story in the Discord or come along and probably been able to read it or listen to it afterwards. And then there's going to be an opportunity for them to add to it, expand it. And what's that process like? People just write out, is it like, are they writing paragraphs? Are they writing pages? Like how much are they producing and submitting? And then before the team reviews it.
So there's no specified length for the continuation of the story. Each partner that we work with are going to be different. I think like a game that's really into the lore. I think there's goofy projects, there's serious projects, there's all types of different kind of projects out there. So some of them, the stories we write will be longer and more intricate. Some of them will be shorter and more fun. So I think you will see different communities have different lengths of chapters that come through, but there's no requirement that it needs to be like this long.
Okay.
You just say, hey, I think this is the complete next chapter in my mind. Here's how I continue this story. And I feel like this picking up where it left off and leaving it off here will also provide another opportunity for someone else to continue the story down the road.
Okay. And then outside of the Genesis text itself, is there any other guidance or goals or objectives or things like that you give to the community to help them find the way? Or is the Genesis text enough to send them on their way?
So we have a Discord, a Spire Discord, and as we get more partners, that will be a place for conversation and collaboration. Each story has its own channel in the Discord. So you can talk about things, you can throw out ideas in there. We have office hours every Tuesday, and people can hop in there and talk to us. We do different writing clinics for people, different art workshops to help people along that process. And I think in general, the art competitions, which we call echoes, are a lot easier. They're more approachable. It's pretty easy to go and put some art together for most people, especially in this space.
Yeah.
So I think the writing is definitely more intimidating to folks. So we try to make ourselves available to help people out who want to participate in that process. I think it's just going to take time for people to get in that mindset that I can do this, and it's pretty cool.
Okay. And then, so when you're doing these echoes, whether it be a writing or a image piece or something like that, is there, when the team is selecting them or during that process, is there any feedback loops from the team itself back to the community as they're working on the stuff?
Yeah, so we've seen some of that from Realm. Sometimes when they select a winner, they'll put out like the reasons why they selected that and talk about ones that they almost selected, why they felt the one that they chose was the best suited for that. And I think a unique thing about Spire is we are our own project, but we're also partnered with projects to develop their lore. So I think you'll also see different teams approach it in different ways. We can build it so that the team is almost essentially completely hands off, and all they have to do is select winners. Other teams, I think, will want to be much more involved, where they're really getting their community rallied around it and having a lot of conversations around it. So
Yeah.
each project is going to be a little bit different. And as far as Spire is concerned, that's okay, because at the end of the day, we want to benefit the projects that we work with in the way that they see it best. So we're here to help in any way that we can. And we're also going to allow them to take the lead on some of the things.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, the parallel I was drawn from my experience was like, say, going to 99 Designs or Fiverr, one of those, running like a design contest. I don't know if you've ever done something like that, but I've done it a ton for making logos and graphics and things. And what I found is the more engaged I was as the customer and giving that feedback, the better results I got. And that's what I was thinking there. I was like, if the team's engaged and they're like, we like this direction, we like that, they can almost kind of steer things while that echo is happening to really help the community land on something that rings true to their vision. So that's where I was going with that.
And I think this is such a new thing too. I think it's going to it takes a while for the community to understand how to interact with it in the best way. I think it'll also take teams a little while to understand how to interact with the community throughout that process as well.
Sure.
So I think we'll see it evolve. And I think what's going to happen is you'll see maybe our next partner will do something that ends up being really successful. And then other partners will emulate that process and be like, hey, they did this with their community and it ended up being really cool. We could do that as well. And then we'll see like best practices come from that. So the more Spires we have, I think the better they will all become.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm putting myself in the shoes of that game developer who might be interested in this. And that's what I'm seeing. Like, one is the first thing I'm getting out of you guys is this like clinic on developing my own lore and internally, right? Like for me and my team to really develop our ideas, that we have them, but they're not as developed as they ought to be, maybe, or could be. And so that's like the first thing. It's like this kind of like expert consulting on beefing up my lore, shoring up my own lore. And then this like facilitated workshopping basically with my community, which I love, right? Because now you're not just producing something and giving it to the community, you're really engaging them and letting them be part of the team that's building the thing. And again, in this space, like people get attached to these projects. Really, I know that happens in regular games too, like outside of Web3, but I really feel like the communities tend to be closer to the teams building these things as it is. And at least for me, I feel very more connected to these games than I ever did with anything that I played outside of Web3. So then being able to contribute to the story too, and this idea of maybe things popping up in the game as a result of this, like you mentioned it from the team story developing and they're saying things might happen in the game. Well, that could happen from the community developed stories too. Probably will at points, right? Something's going to come in the team loves so much, they incorporate into the game. And how cool would that be as a community member to be the one who contributed that and that it was taken and run with? It's amazing. It creates amazing threads for opportunities here.
Yeah, I think what I really envision happening is once the synergy starts to really roll between the team and the community, you're really going to start to see a lot of that stuff. And I think, like you said, if I could submit artwork and that artwork wins a competition and if I win a competition, I get NFTs of my artwork. So that's sent to me as my reward for winning. So what if I win a contest and then that gets turned into an asset in the game? How cool is that? And then how cool is it to own the original 75 NFTs of that work? And it becomes a historical thing. There's so much around like digital collectibles and like Coca-Cola products. People spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on Coca-Cola memorabilia, because it's part of the story. It's part of the history of that brand. It's part of the history of Coca-Cola. So down the
Yep.
road, when Realm has been well established and around for 10 years, how cool are some of those artifacts of, I submitted this art and this is the original art that ended up turning into this thing that's now in the game that's really cool. I think people
Yeah.
want those. And we're a platform to help games develop lore, but we're also a platform to promote and raise up a new generation of artists and writers. Art is so important in this space. And if I contribute to the Spire, I have this whole portfolio of work that I've done. And if I participate in multiple Spires, now I have something to show like, hey, I've done artwork that's part of the on-chain story for these 5 different projects. And I can show that portfolio and show historically like where that's at in the grand scheme of these games, on-chain lore and development. And that's, I think, really cool for people who participate.
100%. And the fact that you guys do the office hours too, because now they're getting expert guidance on their storytelling, right? So if you are an aspiring storyteller, you get to participate in the development of the lore for the game that you love. You're potentially, if you win, you're potentially building up some assets and portfolio, but you're also getting like free training from you guys because you're available to help move this stuff along. And yeah, it's a great package for both the community and the game developer alike, which is amazing. And for you as the founders, like to be able to, if you love creating lore, obviously you wouldn't be doing this. Like you could create lore, but you're doing the teach a man to fish thing here, where you're creating lore, but you're enabling other people to do it too, and like really expanding the impact that you all could have, which is definitely what any founder's after. So I think you're really creating like a true win-win-win scenario here, which is awesome to see.
And it's free to participate. It doesn't cost. All you need to do to submit to a contest is stake a T5 treasure, which I think is like $2-3 right now. And if your submission does not win, you get the treasure returned to you. You can stake it again for another competition. So if you win, your treasure's burned in turn for the NFTs that you get. But outside of that, it's essentially free to participate. Yeah.
A little bit of interoperability worked in there too, which I love. So.
And speaking of interoperability, I think what I'm super excited about is, if you've seen the Spire visual where it has the circles and everything, it's kind of like this little universe and the stories expand and branch off of that. As we get new partners on that user interface, you'll see all the different universes, right? So it'll be like a universe here. And then over time, I think the lore is going to be interoperable. Imagine a branch from the Realmverse connecting with a branch from another project. And we talk about interoperability all the time. I think Realm leads the way with that in the treasure space.
They're doing great.
You can play your Knights of the Ether characters. You can play your Smalls. So what happens when the story of Realm connects with the story of Knights of the Ether? Interoperability shouldn't just be for in-game assets. It should also be to expand like the treasure universe, the Arbitrum universe, and see how all those little universes connect together. I'm super excited about that.
I love that idea. I love the interoperability in general. And that's like the thing really that's excited me about this space, and why I've really dug in like I have, is in a lot of ways, like you said, like it's a great atmosphere for like creative expression, and really gives people artists opportunities to do things that they couldn't do in the physical world, which I love. But this idea of an interoperability, I think, is incredible, and is going to be super important to everything going forward. But what better way to do it than building cool games with cool lore and tying them all together and helping people have fun, bringing joy, all that good stuff, while we develop out this technology, which is going to do other good things for society in the long run. So I think it's just a great test bed for all of this technology and figuring out how to get it all working together. So that's awesome. Now, I want to get back into some of the mechanics here, because you guys have a ton of really clever mechanics built into all of this. And right from the start, so you've created your own boundaries of 6 Genesis techs. You've also got a boundary on the number of spires, right? Out of the gates, like, is that right? 114. So there's only ever going to be 114 of these. So you've got your beginning and your end already pre-programmed. You're giving yourself these boundaries, community boundaries, your customers' boundaries, which is neat in and of itself. But inside of there, it's like it's infinite inside of a finite boundary, which is cool. You got like this fractal thing going on, right?
Yeah.
Because the stories can grow infinitely inside of these bounds, but you've given control of that too to the community and the games with these governance, toggle governance. Is that
Yes.
the term?
Yep.
So I want to talk about that. How does toggle governance work?
Okay.
And just put a bow on the last pieces. You have these echoes or contests for people to develop. Could be imagery, it could be stories, could be music, could be videos, could be any kind of physical or any kind of expression of the story from these echoes. They get selected by the team. And you mentioned this quick, but I just want to make sure people caught it, is they get NFTs, right? Like they get it's like they get a stack of them basically.
Yeah,
Say like
75.
100 of them or something.
75. So there's 100 that
So
the
just walk me
team
through that.
maintains some for the treasury. And then if you win, you get 75 NFTs of that work. You can sell it on secondary. We'll actually be listed on Trove soon. So
Very cool.
Once we get listed on Trove, everyone who has won a contest will be able to list their NFTs on Trove for sale.
All right, that's awesome.
If they choose
so
to
there's
do so.
built to mark. So you got this. Now you've got an asset that you won. Right, you got to create the storyline, which is a win in of itself. But now you got this asset. You can give them to your friends. You can sell them on secondary. You can hang on to.
Yeah, people have been trading them. So like winners will I'll send you one of mine. You send me one of yours, and that way I have the whole collection. So yeah, you can do whatever you
that's
want.
awesome. I love that. So you're giving them something physical, and then after that, like the story can continue infinitely, but only if the community and the team, I believe, have decided it should continue with these governance toggles.
Right.
So take us through that.
Yeah. So the Genesis text, I think the 6 Genesis text each have 100 NFTs associated with them. So there are in total 600 Genesis texts. Each set of Genesis texts, so let's say like story 1, right? Story 1 has 100 Genesis text NFTs associated with it. Each of those has a baked in protocol that's either open or closed. So they default as open. If I purchase one, I can change it to closed. I can put it back open. I can toggle back and forth between that as often as I like. So it doesn't really matter too much in the beginning, but as the stories continue, it will get more and more difficult for that storyline to continue. So we don't want the stories to get stale. We don't want them to necessarily go on forever, although if it's good, why not? So the way that works is at chapter 1, I only need one of those Genesis NFT toggles open. So it's very easy. The more and more it goes, at chapter 50, I need 50% of those to be toggled open. If 49 are toggled open, the story will stop. So our smart contract, everything happens automatically. So as soon as a competition closes, our smart contract is looking for the next competition to open. So as far as the chapters go, what it's looking at is how many of those are toggled open versus how many are toggled closed, and what chapter are we on. If it sees chapter 50 and it only sees 49 Genesis text NFT toggles open, it will skip that competition and go on to the next storyline. And obviously, if the storyline stops, the echoes, which are the art competitions, also stop because those open in conjunction with new chapters.
Okay, so once a chapter is complete and released, then a image echo comes from it?
Yeah, so actually the image echoes go first. So it's like around the clock. You'll go Genesis text, echo competitions for existing storyline. Next Genesis text, echo competitions for existing storyline. And then when it comes back around, it goes chapter. So it happens 2 hands on a clock. So there's one, the hand that moves faster, the minute clock is the echoes, and the hour clock is the chapters.
Got it. Okay.
So it's happening at the same time.
That's another cool little mechanism built in there. There's so much clever stuff going on here. We're never going to be able to talk about all of the things that I want to talk about. I'll mention it now, but I'm going to link up the Medium article that you guys have out there that explains a lot of these mechanics. I strongly recommend anybody that's listening to check that out because it goes through all of this stuff. And there's so many cool little things in there that I've never seen anywhere else before that are worth checking out. We won't be able to get to them all today because I'm spending too much time on each one of them as we get to it. Real quick, on the Genesis texts, is that the kind of same thing where the team gets an allocation of them and then do you release them to the community? How's that work?
So our model right now is when we partner with a team in exchange for us building their Spire, they purchase a certain amount of those Genesis NFTs. Going back to the win-win situations, we want to be as economical and valuable to teams as we can. We got some grant money to help do that, but also instead of them just paying us to do their Spire, we want to give them something in return that's tangible that they can do something with, so they can purchase. And there's no set thing. We work with every team on it, and they end up purchasing a certain amount of those Genesis text. So if a team purchases a bunch of them, they have a pretty vested interest in being able to control, in part, whether the storylines continue or not. And then obviously they can airdrop them to the community. They can give them away for gifts. They can put them in their treasury, whatever they want to do.
Things like that. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So they control them out of the gates. They decide, and they could just keep them too if they wanted to.
Keep them.
If they want to maintain that control over time,
they could.
So they can control
and then
those toggles.
The remainder of the Genesis NFTs will go up for sale on the marketplace when we launch. So that'll be with our next partner. The first thing that goes up on Trove will be Genesis text.
Got it. So you said the teams decide how many to buy. So if there's 600 of them always, right? 6 times 100. And the team says, I want to buy 100 of them, then 500 automatically get released. That's the simple math of it. Okay. Very cool. That makes sense. So the team can decide, I'll effectively pay more for more control or pay less for less control. And that in and of itself is a little bit of a dial. So that's another, all this, I love this, all this clever stuff, man. Super impressive. I could see why you guys spent a couple of years coming up with all of these ideas. So and then is this all automated? So you're talking about this 2 hands on the clock.
Yeah.
Is this, once it's launched, I guess it's running right now, right? Like the Spire engine is running?
Spire is like a living entity. All it takes, Spire will work forever as long as people are contributing and the team is selecting winners. And Spire could also stall for a year and then fire back up and crank a bunch of stuff out. So I think we'll see ebb and flow. Like right now with Realm, they have this huge game update that's happening. They have all these things that they're doing with the community with these ARB rewards. So their Spire has slowed down a little bit, but that's not to say
us.
that once this is over, this Spire will fire back off.
And, that's so good.
Pump out
because now
stories.
It's just ready. So you said there's a lot of time in between game develops sometimes, less so with Realm. Those guys ship like crazy, but there's time between developments, and then this thing's basically configured and running in the background, and as soon as it's needed to draw some attention and keep people engaged, could just do it automatically, which is amazing.
Like
and everything happens.
Everything happens on chain. It's completely self-sufficient, self-sustaining, self-automated, and it just does what it does.
That is amazing. I seriously, I know I keep saying this, but I love this so much. This is one of my favorite ideas I've come across in quite a while, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
So super impressed. Congrats to you and the team for putting together this amazing thing. And now what I want to go, I can keep digging into these mechanics forever, but I know we're getting short on time. I want to talk about what's coming, the grant, etc. So you mentioned it quickly. You guys just received a grant to help you with some expansion. Let's talk about that. What was the process to applying for that? And then what is it doing for you? What does it allow for you to do?
Yeah. So we actually got 2 grants recently. The first one we got was through Arbitrum Questbook. There's a gaming grant, and I think that's still live right now. So if there are any people that hear this that are trying to build something that's a game on Arbitrum, go to Questbook. You can search on Arbitrum there and see the open grants. And I think that one is up to $25,000 US in grant funds available through like different milestones. So we applied for that and we went through a couple of revisions. And that grant, that particular fund is overseen by Fluke from Knights of the Ether. So he goes through and vets them all, provides feedback, and we did a couple of revisions. They asked us to ask for some different things. We went through a couple of rounds of that, and then we were selected. That grant, and we got a grant from Treasure that is similarly structured to the grant. And that was for a community grant. There's actually one that they had listed for, I don't remember if it was community generated content or if it was lore specific, but it was something very specific to what Treasure or to what Spire does. So we submitted for that. It's kind of the same thing, but you put together a proposal, talk about how you're going to use the funds, what funds you're asking for, what your project does, why it's beneficial to the Treasure ecosystem. And then there's community feedback opportunities there for that. There's room for the team to talk back and forth to you. And then there's a grant committee. I think Square Jordan's a part of that. And they ultimately determine whether or not those funds are going to be released. So I think that's been super helpful because it costs us a lot of money to develop Spire, and we didn't want to try to raise funds. We didn't want to be in debt to anyone to get it off the ground. It costs a substantial amount to get it going. We put an incredible amount of work into the research and writing and getting the Spire ready for new teams. So it does cost a lot for us to launch a new Spire. So what the funds are for us is to try and make new Spires affordable to our next handful of partners. So now we're able to say, we can do this for you at a significantly reduced cost based on having these funds available. And it's been tough over the last year for teams to maintain what they're doing throughout the slow market conditions. And it's just not, they don't have necessarily these huge treasuries anymore. So we want to build with them now so that when things turn around and are firing full cylinder, we've already got the groundwork laid for like an incredible Spire for them. So that's what we use the funds for.
That's great. Congrats on getting both of those. I knew you had one. I didn't realize you had two. That's awesome. And I'm very excited to find out who the next project is, and hopefully a whole bunch more projects, because this is really cool stuff. And definitely plan on engaging more than I have. I was in like the Discord, I think a few times when you guys were doing the Realm thing, but I just haven't been able to dive in. And now that I actually took the time to find out what's going on, I will, because it's just too good. So on the way out here, what would be your message to the listener, to the game developer that's out there? Who do you want to work with? Who should reach out to you? And like, how would somebody get in touch to try to explore working with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for games on the Arbitrum ecosystem in Treasure, we're ready to work with people, and we already stated our value proposition. We're going to help make your game stickier. We're going to help keep people engaged. We're going to give them the opportunity to contribute without having to, I was going to say sell their assets. So I think that's down the road, right? Like if you participated in a game and you love it, the only way to make money on it a lot of times is to sell your assets. So I think down the road with the digital collectible aspect of Spire, there's an idea that me participating in a game is going to directly benefit me financially if I can sell some of my pieces. So that's a really cool thing. But if you want to build a world and have a more complete gaming ecosystem, Spire can help you do it by harnessing your most loyal fans. And why not do that? And I think for 100%. People who are looking at participating, just try it out. Like I said before, there's no cost to participate. We want your creativity, not your money. And we're here to help you grow your creativity. Spire can be a launch pad for other things. If you are interested in art or writing or being involved in Web3 more actively, Spire is here to help you do that and help you build a portfolio of your work that you can use down the road. Check it out.
And the proof's in you, because that's what you did. You won a contest and then ultimately built a platform to help other people do the same. So yeah, love that loop. Love that. Love the story arc that's inside of the building of the story. Really a fantastic contribution to Arbitrum and Treasure and everything else. As an Arb Treasure fan, thank you for the contribution. And I'm excited to see where you guys take this. I'd love to have you back sometime, maybe after the next project launches, talk a little bit more about this, because I know there's all kinds of stuff that we didn't even get to touch on here. But really good stuff, man. Where can people find you online and connect with you, Inspire, and et cetera?
Yeah, so spire.lol is our site. You can find all the open competitions there. We have a Twitter. It's at Spire_DAO. And our Discord, Spire, is linked on our Twitter. Come in there, hop in, say hi. We're super open to helping people out. I've looked at people's writing before they submit it and given them feedback, all kinds of things. So it's a resource even outside of Spire related stuff. If you want to be a better writer, if you want to be a better artist, hop in, participate in the community, and check us out.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you again for the awesome platform. I'll link all that stuff down below. And yeah, keep building, man. This is awesome. And
Right.
to you, the listeners and viewers, thank you so much for checking out, especially you guys doing our Senko TV experiment today. Appreciate you. Have a good one.
All right, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Ready Layer 2. If you're an Arbitrum builder with a story to share, then hit me up on Twitter at GitSmall, GITSMOL. Learn more at getsmall.com.